you're looking at two boxes of granola. One says organic, ancient grains, slow roasted. The other just says granola. The first one costs almost 3 times as much, so you'd assume it's made from better stuff, right? Flip both boxes around though and read the ingredient list line by line, and you'll find something that should make you a little annoyed. They're nearly identical, same base grains, same oil, sugar in both, just written differently. The expensive box didn't buy better food. It bought better marketing, and today we're going to take that box apart, piece by piece, and figure out exactly how that trick works. This isn't a takedown of any one brand, it's an audit of an entire aisle. Because somewhere between the parking lot and the checkout line, most of us stop making decisions with our brain and start making them with our gut. Literally and figuratively. A package catches your eye, something in you relaxes a little, and you toss it in the cart without ever turning it over. That's not a personal failing. It's the intended outcome of a design process that food companies have spent decades refining. Packaging researchers and behavioral scientists have long documented how quickly shoppers form judgments about a product before they've read a single word of nutritional information, often in the time it takes to glance at a shelf. Companies know this, so the front of the box isn't really packaging in the traditional sense. It's an argument built to win before you've had a chance to think it over. What we're doing in this video is reverse engineering that argument, not just reading labels, because you already know how to do that, but understanding why the labels are written the way they are, why certain words show up again and again, and why a nearly identical product can be sold at wildly different prices depending on the vocabulary printed on the box. By the end, you'll have a fast, repeatable method for cutting through all of it in the time it takes to pick something off a shelf. Let's start with the part of the product that does the most psychological work and contains the least actual information, the front of the box. Pick up almost any snack marketed as healthy and you'll notice a pattern before you notice anything else. Earthy greens, warm browns, muted craft paper tones. Fonts that look hand-drawn, like someone in an apron wrote the label themselves that morning. A photo of the raw ingredient whole almonds, an oat cluster, a sprig of something green, even though what's actually inside the bag has been baked, extruded, or processed well beyond that raw state. None of this is accidental, and none of it is cheap. Color and design research in consumer psychology has repeatedly shown that people associate green and brown tones with nature, restraint, and health, largely because those colors mimic the visual language of unprocessed food and earth. A cereal box doesn't need to say healthy if the color palette is already saying it for them. The imagery does something even sneakier. Showing a raw almond on a package of roasted, oiled, sugar-coated almond clusters creates what researchers call a health halo, a psychological shortcut where one positive cue causes your brain to assume other positive qualities exist, even without evidence. You see raw almond and your brain quietly fills in healthy, natural, simple, without you ever checking whether those things are actually true. It's the same mental shortcut that made low-fat cookies feel virtuous in the 1990s, even when the sugar content shot up to compensate for the missing fat. The packaging hasn't changed strategy in 30 years, it's just gotten better fonts. And here's the detail that makes this whole system work so well. Most people never see the part of the box where the truth actually lives. Multiple studies on grocery shopping behavior have found that a large share of shoppers make their decision to buy based on the front of the package alone, without ever flipping it over to check the ingredient list or nutrition panel. Brands know this. It's why the front of the box gets the design budget and the back gets the 8-point font legally required to be there. If you never turn it over, you never see the ingredient that changes everything, and that's exactly where we're headed next. Turn the box around, and the first thing worth hunting for isn't fat or calories, it's sugar, or more specifically, all the different names it's hiding behind. Cane sugar, brown rice syrup, coconut sugar, brown rice syrup, coconut sugar, date syrup, agave nectar, honey, maple syrup, fruit juice concentrate. Each one sounds like it came from a different, more virtuous corner of the pantry. Chemically though, they're all still forms of added sugar, and your body processes them in largely the same way. Our regulatory quirk makes this even murkier. Added sugars only have to be grouped together as a single line item on newer nutrition labels, but the ingredient list itself can still scatter multiple sugar sources throughout. So a product can technically list cane sugar 4th and brown rice syrup 9th, making it look like sugar is a minor player when combined. It might actually be the single largest ingredient by weight. This is where the word organic does some quiet, powerful work. Organic cane sugar is still sugar. The certification tells you something about how the sugar cane was farmed. No synthetic pesticides, no genetically modified seed, but it says nothing about what that sugar does once it's in your bloodstream. Your metabolism doesn't check the farming method before deciding how to respond to glucose and fructose. And yet, pairing organic with a sugar source measurably softens how risky people perceive that ingredient to be. It's a halo effect again, just wearing a different outfit. The word organic borrows credibility from the farming world and lends it to the nutrition conversation, even though the two aren't really answering the same question. So why do so many healthy snack brands specifically reach for something like brown rice syrup or coconut sugar instead of plain white sugar, when the metabolic difference is often minor? Because plain sugar on an ingredient list triggers instant recognition and instant judgment. Consumers have spent years being told to watch their sugar intake, so the word itself has become a red flag. Swap it for a name that sounds like it came from a small farm rather than a refinery, and you diffuse that red flag without changing much about what's actually in the bag. This is the linguistic loophole in its purest form. Nothing about the nutrition changes, only the vocabulary does, and that vocabulary shift is often worth real money at checkout. Now let's talk about a phrase that's exploded across snack aisles in the last decade and carries almost no nutritional meaning on its own. Plant-based. Technically, a plant-based product is one made without animal-derived ingredients. That's it. That's the whole definition. White sugar is plant-based. Refined vegetable oil is plant-based. Bleached wheat flour, stripped of its fiber and nutrients, is plant-based. A candy bar made entirely from sugar, palm oil, and cocoa butter can accurately call itself plant-based, and so can a bag of steamed broccoli. The term describes a category of origin, not a level of processing or a nutritional profile, and food companies have leaned into that gap hard because plant-based carries an emotional association with health, sustainability, and virtue that the actual ingredients frequently don't earn. Look closely at a lot of plant-based snack clusters, the granola bars, the protein bites, the crunchy clusters marketed for the clean snacking crowd, and you'll often find a familiar backbone underneath the branding: refined oils, isolated plant proteins, gums and starches for texture, and one or more of those sugar aliases we just covered, all bound together and lightly dusted with something oppressive, like ancient grains or superfood berries that might make up 2 or 3 berries that might make up 2 or 3% of the total product. The plant-based label is accurate. It's also nearly meaningless as a health signal because it was never built to measure health in the first place. It was built to measure the absence of animal ingredients, which is a completely different question that consumers have learned, often without realizing it, to answer as though we're the same one. This is where things start to get genuinely expensive for you, the shopper, and this next comparison tends to catch people off guard. Take a popular $10 plant-based protein cluster and set it next to a standard, unbranded granola cluster sitting on a nearby shelf for a third of the price. Read both ingredient lists side by side. In a lot of cases, you'll find the same core structure: oats or grains, a refined oil, 1 or 2 sugar sources, a binding agent, with the expensive version adding a small amount of pea protein isolate or a sprinkle of chia seeds near the bottom of the list. Where the smallest quantity ingredients live, that handful of premium-sounding additions is doing a huge amount of pricing work. You're not paying triple for triple the nutrition. You're paying triple for a design team, a marketing campaign, and the few grams of an ingredient that costs the company almost nothing relative to what it lets them charge you. Which brings us to the part of this audit where we actually follow the money. Because understanding the psychology only gets you halfway there. The real question is where your dollars are going once they leave your hand. A meaningful portion of the price difference between a premium health snack and its plain counterpart has nothing to do with the ingredients inside the bag. It's paying for brand development, package design, shelf placement fees that retailers charge for primary level positioning, and marketing campaigns, including the kind of content you're watching right now, ironically enough, since food brands spend heavily on influencer and creator partnerships to keep that health halo glowing. Organic certification does add real cost, since it requires farming practices that are typically less efficient at scale and involves ongoing auditing fees. But that cost is usually a modest fraction of the final retail markup, not the majority of it. The most useful number to actually calculate at the store isn't the price on the shelf tag, it's the price per ounce, sitting right next to it in smaller print that most people glance past entirely. Grab your phone calculator for a second next time you're standing in that aisle and divide price by weight for two comparable products, one branded as premium, one plain. You'll frequently find a gap of 2, sometimes 3 times the cost per ounce, for ingredient lists that are, structurally, doing the same job with the same core inputs. That gap is the clearest, least emotional way to see exactly what the branding is worth in dollars, stripped of every color palette and font choice designed to distract you from doing that math in the first place. So how do you actually use all of this the next time you're standing in an aisle with limited time and a cart full of other things to buy? You don't need a nutrition degree, and you don't need to read every word on every label. You need 3 quick checks done in order, and you can run through all of them in under 15 seconds per product. First, ignore the front of the box completely. Every color, every font, every photo of a raw almond, treat it as decoration, not information, because that's precisely what it's designed to be. Flip straight to the ingredient list. Second, count. Registered dietitians commonly point shoppers toward what's sometimes called the 5-ingredient rule as a fast filter, not a rigid law but a useful gut check. The shorter and more recognizable the ingredient list, the less industrial processing typically stands between you and the actual food. A product with 20 ingredients, several of them gums, isolates, and stabilizers, isn't automatically dangerous, but it is a manufactured food product doing a lot of engineering to achieve a specific texture and shelf life, and that's worth knowing before you decide it deserves a premium price. Third, hunt for sugar in all its disguises. Scan for the words syrup, nectar, and anything ending in juice, dextrose, maltose, fructose, and notice where they land in the ingredient order and how many different versions show up. One sugar source low on the list is a very different product from 4 sugar sources scattered throughout that would rank near the top if you combine them. Run those 3 checks and you'll filter out the vast majority of marketing noise in less time than it takes to read one paragraph on the box itself. That's the whole method. Not a diet, not a rule book, just a faster, sharper way of seeing what's actually in front of you. Go back to those 2 granola boxes from the very beginning. One dressed up in earth tones and ancient grain language, one plain and unbothered by any of it. The real skill isn't picking the box with the prettiest story printed on the front. It's realizing that the pretty story is the product being sold to you, separate from the fruit itself, and that you get to decide whether it's worth paying for. Often, the healthiest thing sitting on that shelf is the one that felt the least need to convince you of anything. The plain bag, the short ingredient list, the box that didn't spend its budget on a font that looks handwritten. You don't need to distrust every label you see from now on. You just need to know which 15 seconds of it actually matter. Next time you're standing in that aisle and you catch a sneaky label hiding behind clean-sounding language, snap a photo of it and drop it in the comments. It's the fastest way to build a shared list of the tricks worth watching for, and honestly, seeing what other people find is half the fun of an audit like this one.